You know that moment when your world tilts sideways, and you realize everything you believed about someone was a carefully constructed lie? When the ground beneath your feet crumbles, and you're left standing in the wreckage of what you thought was genuine friendship. That moment changes you forever. It strips away your innocence about human nature and forces you to confront a truth so painful it rewrites your understanding of trust itself. Some betrayals come like lightning strikes. Sudden, brutal, impossible to ignore. Others seep in slowly like poison, contaminating everything they touch until you're left wondering how you missed the signs that were probably there all along. Mine was the lightning kind, and even now, months later, I can still feel the electric burn of that revelation searing through my chest. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because every devastating ending deserves its proper context. My name is Imogen, and I've always been the type of person who believes in the goodness of others. Perhaps that was my first mistake. This inherent trust one placed in people's intentions, this assumption that beneath every smile lay genuine warmth. My mother used to say I had a heart too big for my own good, and looking back now, I think she might have been warning me about exactly this kind of situation. I met Cordelia during our first week at university. She was everything I wasn't, confident where I was shy, outspoken where I was reserved, effortlessly popular where I struggled to make even casual acquaintances. She had this magnetic quality that drew people to her like moths to flame, and when she chose to befriend me, I felt like I'd won some sort of cosmic lottery. We were in the same English literature course, and during one particularly tedious lecture on Victorian poetry, she leaned over and whispered a wickedly funny observation about our professor's dramatic reading style that had me stifling giggles behind my notebook. After class, she linked her arm through mine as if we'd been friends for years and suggested we grab coffee. "You're different from the others," she said over our steaming mugs in the campus cafe. "There's something authentic about you, Imogen." I like that. Those words should have made me happy, but there was something in the way she said, "the others," that gave me pause. Still, I was so starved for genuine connection that I pushed aside any reservations. Here was this brilliant, charismatic girl who seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. Why would I question such a gift? Over the following months, Cordelia became the sister I'd never had. We spent countless hours together, studying in the library, exploring the town's hidden gems, sharing our deepest thoughts and fears during late-night conversations in her dorm room. She had this way of making me feel special, as if I was the only person in the world who truly understood her. When I confessed my anxiety about public speaking before a major presentation, she spent hours helping me practice, offering encouragement and practical advice. When I struggled with homesickness during those early weeks away from home, she organized movie marathons and surprise care packages to lift my spirits. When I hesitantly shared my dream of becoming a writer, she was the first person to tell me I had real talent and should pursue it seriously. "You have such a unique voice," she would say, reading over my creative writing assignments. "Don't let anyone dim that light, Imogen. The world needs more writers like you." I treasured these moments. In Cordelia, I thought I had found someone who truly saw me. Not just the quiet, bookish girl others dismissed, but the real me with all my hopes and dreams and secret ambitions. She made me feel valued, important, worthy of friendship. We developed our own little traditions and inside jokes. Sunday morning brunches at the small cafe off campus where she would order ridiculous combinations of food just to make me laugh. Evening walks around the campus lake where we would dissect every detail of our classes, our professors, our fellow students. Study sessions that inevitably devolved into deep philosophical discussions about life, love, and everything in between. I introduced her to my family during Parents' Weekend, and she charmed them completely with her wit and apparent devotion to our friendship. My mother pulled me aside later and whispered, "She seems lovely, darling. I'm so glad you found such a good friend." Even my usually reserved father commented on how articulate and engaging she was. Cordelia had this way of remembering everything. My favorite tea, the books I mentioned wanting to read, the small anxieties I shared in confidence. She would surprise me with little gestures that seemed so thoughtful, so perfectly calibrated to show she truly cared. A first edition of a book I'd mentioned coveting, left on my desk with a note saying, "Every writer needs inspiration." My favorite chocolates appearing during exam week with an encouraging message. Flowers on my birthday when I thought everyone had forgotten. I felt so grateful to have her in my life. Here was someone who not only accepted my quirks and insecurities but seemed to celebrate them. When other students made jokes about my habit of always having a book in hand, Cordelia would defend me fiercely. Intelligence is never something to apologize for, she would say, shooting disapproving looks at anyone who dared mock my studious nature. She became my champion, my protector, my closest confidant. I told her things I had never shared with another soul. My secret poetry, my complicated relationship with my father, my fears about not being interesting enough or pretty enough or clever enough to matter in the world. She listened with what seemed like genuine empathy, offering comfort and reassurance whenever my self-doubt crept in. "You're extraordinary, Imogen," she would tell me during my moments of insecurity. "I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." I believed her completely. How could I not? Every action, every word seemed to confirm that our friendship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection. She invited me to parties where she would introduce me as her brilliant best friend. She included me in her social circle, though I often felt like an awkward addition to her effortlessly cool group of friends. She made me feel like I belonged somewhere for the first time in my life. Looking back now, I can see the subtle signs I missed. The way she would sometimes pause just a beat too long before responding when I shared something personal, as if calculating her reaction. The slight eye rolls when she thought I wasn't looking during my more enthusiastic moments about books or writing. The way conversations always seemed to circle back to her experiences, her problems, her triumphs, with my own contributions serving more as launching points for her stories than genuine exchanges. But I was so hungry for connection, so grateful for what felt like acceptance, that I rationalized away any moments of doubt. Everyone has off days, I told myself. Everyone gets distracted sometimes. The important thing was that she was there for me when it mattered, and she certainly seemed to be. She was there when I cried over a harsh critique from a professor who told me my writing was derivative and lacking in original thought. She held me while I sobbed and assured me that the professor was wrong, that my voice was unique and valuable. She was there when I received news that my grandmother had passed away, helping me navigate the complex emotions of grief and loss. She was there when I had my first real heartbreak over a boy who barely knew I existed, listening to my mortification with apparent sympathy and understanding. In all these moments, she seemed so genuine, so caring. Her comfort felt real, her anger on my behalf seemed authentic, her encouragement appeared heartfelt. I had no reason to doubt the sincerity of our connection. Why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to fake friendship? What could she possibly gain from pretending to care about someone as ordinary as me? These questions never occurred to me at the time. I was too busy being grateful for what I believed was the first real friendship of my life. Cordelia made me feel special, chosen, important. For someone who had always felt invisible, her attention was intoxicating. I would lie awake at night sometimes, marveling at my good fortune. How had I, quiet little Imogen from a small town in Yorkshire, managed to become best friends with someone so dynamic and magnetic? It felt too good to be true, but I pushed away those thoughts as quickly as they arose. I deserved friendship, didn't I? I deserved to be loved and valued, didn't I? The irony wasn't lost on me even then that I needed to convince myself I was worthy of the friendship I thought I had. But I attributed those moments of self-doubt to my own insecurities, not to any real problem with our relationship. Cordelia seemed so sure of our bond, so consistent in her affection, that I trusted her certainty more than my own occasional unease. As our first year drew to a close, I felt like I had finally found my place in the world. I had a best friend who understood me, supported me, and seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. I had a social circle, even if I felt peripheral to it. I had confidence in my writing that I'd never possessed before, largely thanks to Cordelia's encouragement. I felt like I was becoming the person I was meant to be. We made plans for the summer break, promising to visit each other and maintain our close connection despite the distance. We talked about sharing a flat the following year, about the adventures we would have, about how our friendship would only grow stronger with time. We're going to be friends forever, aren't we? I asked one evening as we sat by the lake, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. Of course we are, she replied without hesitation. Friends like us don't come along every day. Imogen. What we have is special. I believed her completely. How could I not, when everything in our relationship seemed to confirm the truth of those words? But sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from the people we trust most completely. Sometimes the very certainty we feel about someone's affection for us is built on foundations of sand, ready to collapse the moment we discover the truth about their real feelings. I was about to learn that lesson in the most painful way possible. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in early May, just 3 weeks before the end of term. I had left my favorite scarf in the common room of Cordelia's dormitory the previous evening during one of our study sessions, and I decided to retrieve it before my afternoon seminar. The building was unusually quiet. Most students were either in classes or had already departed for early summer breaks. I used the spare key Cordelia had given me to let myself into the common room. We had exchanged keys months earlier, a gesture that had felt like such a symbol of trust and intimacy at the time. Mi casa yes su casa, she had joked, pressing the small metal key into my palm. I want you to feel at home here. As I searched for my scarf among the cushions of the worn leather sofa where we had spent countless hours talking, I heard voices drifting from the kitchenette around the corner. I recognized Cordelia's distinctive laugh immediately. That bright, musical sound that had drawn me to her from the beginning. I was about to call out and announce my presence when I heard my own name spoken in a tone that made me freeze mid-step. Honestly, Imogen is becoming exhausting, Cordelia was saying, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who believed themselves unobserved. The way she follows me around like a lost puppy is getting embarrassing. My heart stopped. Surely I had misheard. Surely she wasn't talking about me, her best friend, the person she claimed to care about so deeply. I thought you two were close, came another voice, Tabitha, one of the girls from Cordelia's social circle. I recognized her cut-glass accent and perpetually bored tone. Close. Cordelia laughed, and the sound that had once brought me such joy now felt like glass shards in my chest. She thinks we're close. I've been playing the part of devoted best friend because, honestly, it's been rather amusing. You should see how grateful she gets over the smallest gestures. It's pathetic, really. I pressed myself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some terrible misunderstanding, some cruel joke I wasn't understanding properly. But you spend so much time with her, Tabitha pressed, sounding genuinely confused. Someone has to throw the poor creature a bone occasionally, Cordelia replied with mock sympathy. She's so desperate for friendship that she practically worships anyone who shows her the slightest bit of attention. It's actually quite sad when you think about it. Surely you don't really dislike her that much? This was a third voice, Penelope, another member of their tight-knit group. Dislike is too strong a word, Cordelia mused, and I could picture her examining her perfectly manicured nails the way she did when discussing something that bored her. She's harmless enough, I suppose. Just incredibly dull. Do you know she actually tried to show me some of her poetry last week? Amateur hour doesn't begin to cover it. But I nodded along and told her it was brilliant because honestly, the look of pure joy on her face was worth the lie. The room tilted around me. Every word was a physical blow, each syllable reshaping my understanding of every interaction we had ever had. The poetry she had encouraged me to share, the same poetry she had praised so enthusiastically, was apparently nothing more than a source of private amusement. You're awful, Penelope said, but she was giggling as she said it. Am I, though? Cordelia's voice took on a philosophical tone that I knew well. It was the same voice she used during our deep late-night conversations. I've given her the friendship experience she so desperately craved. I've made her feel special and valued. Isn't that a kindness in its way? But it's all fake, Tabitha pointed out. Is it, though? The emotions she's experiencing are real. The confidence she's gained from thinking someone believes in her, that's genuine, even if the foundation is, let's say, flexible. I've actually done her a tremendous service. Before me, she was just another invisible bookworm. I've given her a taste of what it feels like to matter. My legs were shaking so violently I had to lean against the wall for support. Every kindness, every moment of apparent intimacy, every expression of care and concern. It had all been an elaborate performance. But why? What could she possibly gain from such an extended charade? As if she could read my thoughts from across the room, Cordelia continued. Besides, it's been an interesting psychological experiment. How long can you maintain someone's devotion through strategic kindness? How much genuine emotion can you inspire through carefully calibrated gestures? Turns out quite a lot. She's been utterly devoted for months now. That's actually rather brilliant, Tabitha said admiringly. You should study psychology instead of literature. Oh, I plan to minor in it, Cordelia replied airily. Imogen has been excellent practice for understanding human nature. The poor dear is so transparent. Every insecurity written across her face like an open book. It's been child's play to figure out exactly what she needed to hear to remain utterly devoted. The worst part wasn't even the cruelty of her words. It was how accurately she had read me. Every vulnerability I had shared in confidence had been catalogued and weaponized. Every fear I had whispered in the dark had been noted and filed away for her own amusement. I had laid myself bare to someone who viewed my trust as nothing more than raw material for her entertainment. "What will you do when term ends?" Penelope asked. "You can't keep this up forever." "Oh, I'll probably let it fade naturally over the summer," Cordelia said casually, as if discussing plans to discard an old handbag. "Distance has a way of cooling these intense friendships. By September, I'll be free to form more suitable connections without hurting her feelings too badly. She'll probably convince herself that we simply grew apart, which is kinder than the truth." "The truth being?" Tabitha prompted. "That I was bored out of my mind from day one, but she was so desperately grateful for any attention that I couldn't bring myself to crush her immediately. It seemed unnecessarily cruel when she was so obviously lonely. At least this way, she's had a year of thinking she mattered to someone." I had heard enough. More than enough. I needed to get out of there before they discovered me, before they saw the devastation written across my face and realized their victim had been present for her own character assassination. Moving with the careful precision of someone in shock, I gathered my things and crept toward the door. My scarf, the reason I had come here in the first place, lay forgotten on the sofa. I couldn't bear to spend another second in that place. Couldn't risk them seeing me and knowing that I had overheard their casual destruction of everything I had believed about my life. The walk back to my own dormitory passed in a blur. Students called out greetings that I didn't return. Professors nodded acknowledgments that I didn't register. I felt like I was moving through water, every step requiring tremendous effort, every breath a conscious decision. Once safely in my room, I locked the door and sank onto my narrow bed, finally allowing myself to fully absorb what I had just learned. Every memory was tainted now, every moment of apparent closeness revealed as calculated manipulation. The care packages during exam week. Strategic gestures to maintain my devotion. The encouragement about my writing. False praise designed to keep me emotionally invested. The late-night conversations where I had bared my soul. Entertainment for someone who found my inner life amusing rather than meaningful. I thought about all the times I had defended our friendship to people who seemed skeptical. "You don't know Cordelia like I do," I had said. "She's not as shallow as she appears." The irony was overwhelming. I hadn't known Cordelia at all, while others had apparently seen through her performance more clearly than I ever had. The most painful part was realizing how completely I had been deceived by my own desperate need for connection. Every red flag I had dismissed, every moment of unease I had rationalized away. They had all been accurate assessments that I had been too lonely and too grateful to acknowledge. I spent the rest of that day in my room, ignoring calls from Cordelia that grew increasingly frequent as the hours passed. Each ringtone felt like another lie, another manipulation disguised as concern. "Imogen, where are you? I haven't seen you all day and I'm getting worried. Call me back, darling. Seriously, Imogen, you're scaring me. Did something happen? Please just let me know you're okay. I'm starting to think something terrible has happened. I'm coming over if you don't answer your phone in the next hour." The messages would have seemed caring to someone who didn't know the truth. Even knowing what I knew, part of me almost believed the concern in her voice was genuine. She was that good at the performance, that skilled at manipulating emotion and perception. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the wreckage of my understanding. How had I been so blind? How had I mistaken calculated kindness for genuine affection? How had I been so starved for friendship that I had accepted an elaborate lie as the foundation of my social world? The questions circled endlessly, each one leading to more pain, more confusion, more self-recrimination. I felt stupid and naive and utterly alone in a way that was somehow worse than the loneliness I had felt before meeting Cordelia. At least then, my isolation had been honest. The next morning brought a soft knock on my door that I recognized immediately. Cordelia had come to check on me in person, just as her final message had promised. For a moment, I was almost impressed by her commitment to the performance. Even knowing that I was nothing more than a psychological experiment to her, she was still playing the role of concerned best friend. "Imogen? I know you're in there. Please open the door. I'm worried sick about you." I sat on my bed, listening to her voice through the thin door, and marveled at how convincing she sounded. If I hadn't heard her true feelings with my own ears, I would have believed every word. "Darling, please. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Just let me in so we can talk." The endearment that had once made me feel cherished now made my skin crawl. How many times had she called me darling, while privately mocking my devotion? How many pet names and gentle touches had been nothing more than tools to maintain my emotional investment in her fiction? "I'm not leaving until you talk to me, Imogen. That's what friends do. They don't abandon each other when things get difficult." The word friends hung in the air like a poison dart. She was still performing, still maintaining the illusion even when she thought I was simply having some sort of emotional crisis. The dedication to her role would have been admirable if it weren't so utterly horrifying. I could hear her settling in outside my door, making good on her promise not to leave. Part of me was curious to see how long she would maintain the vigil, how much effort she was willing to invest in her psychological experiment. But I couldn't bear to find out. I couldn't face the prospect of looking into those familiar eyes and seeing the calculation behind the concern. Instead, I climbed out my ground floor window, a feat that would have seemed impossible just days before but now felt like a matter of survival. I needed to get away from her voice, her presence, the suffocating weight of her performance. I spent that day walking aimlessly through town, trying to process the complete upheaval of my reality. Everything I had believed about myself, about friendship, about human nature, had been revealed as naive at best and dangerously foolish at worst. The worst part was how thoroughly she had succeeded in her experiment. I had been utterly devoted, completely convinced of her affection, genuinely grateful for her friendship. She had read me perfectly, identified exactly what I needed to hear, and delivered it with such precision that I had never once questioned her sincerity. I was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. My desperate need for acceptance had made me an easy target. My loneliness had blinded me to obvious signs of manipulation. My gratitude for any positive attention had prevented me from maintaining healthy boundaries or realistic expectations. But perhaps most painful was the realization that everything I had gained from our friendship, the confidence, the sense of belonging, the belief in my own worth, was built on a foundation of lies. How could I trust any of those positive feelings when they had been engineered by someone who viewed me as nothing more than an amusing diversion? As evening approached, I finally returned to my dormitory to find my door plastered with notes from Cordelia. Each one escalated the apparent concern while maintaining the perfect tone of devoted friendship. "I've been here for hours. Please just give me some sign that you're okay. I'm going to call your parents if you don't respond soon. I can't stand not knowing if something terrible has happened. Whatever I did wrong, I'm sorry. Please don't shut me out like this." That last note almost broke something in me. The idea that she was still performing, still pretending to care even in private correspondence, suggested a level of commitment to the deception that bordered on pathological. I crumpled up the notes and let myself into my room, checking quickly to make sure she wasn't lying in wait. The coast was clear, but I knew it wouldn't be long before she returned. I needed to decide what to do, how to handle this impossible situation. Part of me wanted to confront her directly, to throw her words back in her face and force her to acknowledge what she had done. But what would be the point? She would probably just deny everything, or worse, express pity for my misunderstanding in that same caring tone she had perfected over the months of our fake friendship. Another part of me wanted to disappear entirely, to request a transfer to another university where I could start fresh without the weight of this betrayal following me. But why should I be the one to run? Why should I uproot my entire life because someone had chosen to view me as entertainment? No, there was only one response that felt true to who I was and what I deserved. I needed to walk away with whatever dignity I could salvage, to end this farce on my own terms rather than waiting for her to grow bored and discard me as she had always planned. I spent the weekend crafting what I came to think of as my farewell letter. It wasn't angry or accusatory. I had no desire to engage in a dramatic confrontation or to give her more material for her psychological experiments. Instead, I wrote with the clarity that comes from finally seeing a situation for what it truly is. "Dear Cordelia," I began and then paused. Even that simple salutation felt strange now, addressing someone who had never been who I thought she was. "I've recently learned some things that have given me a new perspective on our friendship. Rather than discuss this in person, I've decided it would be best for both of us if we went our separate ways. Please don't try to contact me or come to my room. I won't be responding to calls or messages. I want you to know that despite everything, I don't regret the time we spent together. I learned a great deal about myself and about the nature of human relationships. Some lessons are painful but necessary, and this has certainly been one of them. I wish you well in all your future endeavors, including your planned minor in psychology. You clearly have a talent for understanding human nature, even if you choose to use that understanding in ways I cannot condone. Please return any belongings of mine that you may have in your possession by leaving them outside my door. I will do the same with anything of yours. Thank you for the experience, even though it wasn't what I believed it to be at the time. Sincerely, Imogen. I read the letter several times, struck by how calm and rational it sounded. There was no trace of the devastation I felt, no hint of the betrayal that had shattered my understanding of trust and friendship. Perhaps that was for the best. She didn't deserve to know the full extent of the damage she had caused, didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing how completely she had succeeded in her experiment. I slipped the letter under her door early Monday morning, before dawn, when I was certain she wouldn't be awake to catch me in the act. Then I returned to my room and waited. The response came within hours. Frantic knocking on my door accompanied by increasingly desperate pleas. Imogen, what is this letter about? I don't understand what's happened. Please just talk to me. This is insane. We're best friends. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Please give me a chance to explain. I don't know what someone has told you, but they're lying. You know me, Imogen. You know how much our friendship means to me. I listened to it all from my bed, marveling at her commitment to the performance even now. She had to know that I had somehow discovered the truth, yet she was still maintaining the fiction of caring about me. It was almost impressive in its audacity. The knocking and pleading continued for what felt like hours. I could hear other students in the hallway beginning to take notice, their voices carrying snippets of curiosity and concern. Is everything all right? Should we call someone? Maybe she's sick or something? Eventually, Cordelia seemed to realize that her public display was drawing unwanted attention. The knocking stopped, and I heard her footsteps retreating down the hallway. But she wasn't done. Over the next few days, she tried every method of contact she could think of. Text messages that ranged from confused to desperate to angry. Emails that painted increasingly dramatic pictures of her distress over my sudden withdrawal. Voice messages that would have broken my heart if I hadn't known the truth behind them. She even recruited mutual acquaintances to reach out on her behalf, though I suspected she painted the situation in terms that made her look like the innocent victim of my inexplicable hostility. Cordelia is really worried about you, Tabitha said, cornering me after a lecture. She says you won't talk to her and she has no idea why. That doesn't sound like you, Imogen. I looked at Tabitha with new eyes, wondering if she was genuinely trying to help or if this was another layer of Cordelia's manipulation. Had she told Tabitha about my overheard conversation, or was Tabitha truly unaware of the psychological experiment I had unwittingly participated in? Sometimes friendships run their course, I said simply. It's nothing dramatic, just time to move on. Tabitha looked confused by my calm response. But you two were inseparable. Cordelia says you're like sisters. The word sisters hit me like a physical blow. How many times had Cordelia used that exact comparison to describe our bond? How many times had I treasured the implication that our connection was familial in its depth and permanence? People change, I said, and walked away before Tabitha could see the tears forming in my eyes. As the final weeks of term drew to a close, I found myself examining every interaction I had had over the past year with new skepticism. How many other relationships in my life were built on similar foundations of convenience or entertainment? How many people saw me as Cordelia had? A harmless diversion, someone whose gratitude could be easily earned and whose devotion could be maintained through strategic kindness. The paranoia was almost worse than the initial betrayal. At least the pain of discovering Cordelia's true feelings was clean and sharp. This new suspicion of everyone's motives was a constant low-level ache that colored every social interaction with doubt. I began to withdraw from the few other friendships I had tentatively formed during my time at university. Better to be alone and honest than connected and uncertain, I reasoned. At least loneliness was straightforward. It didn't pretend to be something else. My academic work became my sole focus, and perhaps ironically, it improved dramatically. Without the distraction of maintaining social relationships or the emotional energy drain of constantly trying to read other people's true intentions, I poured myself into my studies with single-minded determination. My professors began to take notice of the change in my work. Essays that had previously been competent but unremarkable suddenly showed flashes of insight and original thinking that caught their attention. "Miss Hartwell," Professor Morrison said after returning a particularly well-received paper on feminist themes in Victorian literature, "I'd like to discuss your graduate school options with you. Have you given any thought to pursuing an advanced degree?" The conversation was surreal. Here was genuine recognition of my abilities. Not the calculated praise Cordelia had offered to maintain my emotional investment, but honest professional assessment of my academic potential. It should have felt wonderful, but I found myself analyzing Professor Morrison's words for hidden meanings or ulterior motives. Was he being sincere, or was this another performance designed to serve his own purposes? Did he genuinely believe in my potential, or was I projecting my desperate need for validation onto his professional courtesy? The questions exhausted me, but they also served a purpose. If I was going to doubt everyone's motives, at least I could channel that skepticism into something productive. I threw myself into research with the intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose. The end of term arrived with a flurry of exams and final papers that kept most students too busy for extended social interactions. I was grateful for the distraction and the legitimate excuse to avoid the few remaining attempts at contact from Cordelia and her circle. My belongings had appeared outside my door as requested, neatly packed in a box with no accompanying note. I was almost disappointed by the lack of any final manipulative gesture. No heartfelt letter begging for another chance. No strategic gift designed to evoke guilt or nostalgia. Perhaps she had finally accepted that her experiment was over, or perhaps she had simply moved on to more interesting subjects. I packed my own belongings with methodical precision, each item carrying memories that I needed to process and then pack away. The books she had given me as gifts. Were they genuine gestures or calculated investments in my devotion? The photos of our adventures together. Were those smiles real or performed for the camera? Some things I kept, not because I treasured the memories but because they served as reminders of lessons learned. The first edition book she had given me for my birthday went into my suitcase as a talisman against future deception. Let it remind me to question the motives behind even the most thoughtful gestures. Other things I donated to the charity bin in the dormitory lobby. The scarf I had been looking for that fateful day, the one that had led me to overhear the truth, went into the donation pile with a sense of poetic justice. Let it keep someone else warm, someone who might appreciate its beauty without the baggage of betrayal. As I sealed the last box of my belongings, I realized that I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for Cordelia's friendship, which had never been real, but for the harsh education in human nature that her deception had provided. I was leaving university a different person than I had arrived. Less trusting, certainly, but also less naive. More guarded, but also more discerning. I had learned to value authentic connection over the mere appearance of friendship, and while that lesson had come at a painful cost, it was knowledge that would serve me well in the years to come. The train journey home gave me hours to reflect on the year that was ending and the future that lay ahead. The landscape outside the window blurred past in shades of green and gold, and I found myself thinking about the person I had been when I first arrived at university and the person I was becoming. A year ago, I had been desperate for connection, so hungry for friendship that I would have accepted almost any overture of kindness without question. That desperation had made me vulnerable to manipulation, but it had also made me capable of deep loyalty and genuine affection. I didn't want to lose those qualities, even if they had been weaponized against me. The challenge would be learning to maintain openness to authentic relationships while developing better defenses against those who would exploit my capacity for trust. It would mean accepting that some loneliness was preferable to false connection, that being selective about friendship was not the same as being closed off to human connection entirely. I thought about the writing I had shared with Cordelia, the poetry and short stories that I had believed she admired but which she had privately mocked. Her dismissal of my work as amateur hour had cut deeply, not because I valued her opinion above all others, but because I had trusted her assessment and allowed it to shape my understanding of my own abilities. Now I would have to learn to separate her calculated responses from my own authentic relationship with my writing. Did my work have value independent of her false praise? Could I trust my own instincts about what made good writing, or had her manipulation corrupted even my ability to assess my own creative efforts?